Siri, ask ChatGPT how to convince John Stamos to make out with me. Alright, I think I kind of dig this. So I've been using this iPad for just over a week now, and I think I might be in the minority here as somebody who actually really loves this device for all that it is. I've had the chance to watch some other reviews about this iPad, and it seems to be a mixed bag of disappointment considering the lack of updates from Apple on this iPad for what I think might be still the best iPad ever made. And of course, absolutely, it's not perfect whatsoever. And yeah, there could have definitely been more here on the iPad Mini 7, especially compared to the Mini 6. But honestly, the upgrades that have happened are absolutely magnificent. Now, for me at least, why this iPad Mini is so special is the simple fact that it's not trying to be something it isn't. Take me, for example. I often pretend like I'm smarter than I really am, and I'm a wannabe minimalist. But I frankly own way too much stuff. And get this, believe it or not, and it might sound crazy, I'm actually not a fire truck. No, but for real though, it seems that Apple loves to market the other iPads as these sort of computer replacements, which yeah, you can sort of pull that off with some effort, but the iPad Mini, it's literally just trying to be a small iPad and nothing more. That isn't to say this basic ass iPad can't do loads of other things, because it definitely can. For example, this can get Final Cut Pro now and work project like crazy, but none of this is in Apple's marketing material for this iPad specifically. Still, it has been an incredible tablet to date, so much so that even over my M4 iPad Pro, the iPad Mini lineup has still remained my preferred go-to tablet to date. Apart from that, the obvious thing here is that this is the only small iPad, which is something that I really do appreciate. And in my world, at least, this iPad remains sort of the tablet I use for fun stuff, but also has productivity thrown in the mix. This thing is absolutely pocketable, it's tiny, and it's a pleasure to take with me just about anywhere I go. And it is a bit of a niche reason why this iPad is a little extra special for me is the fact that it allows me to keep iMessage and FaceTime to stay connected with my family and friends for the times I am using a dumb phone instead of my iPhone.
No, sir, I said net 30-day terms. Oh, no, that is incorrect. The iPad Mini 7 is the best of all time. Suck my No, I haven't a clue what percentage of water Vaporeon is. What kind of question is that?
Now, apart from all of that, what's actually new on this iPad Mini 7? Well, the first thing I can say is probably Siri, because she used to be pretty much garbage and would actually treat me like garbage. Hey Siri, why don't you love me?
Sorry, I don't understand.
But you never do! Full disclaimer though, the iPad Mini 7 as of today though only has iPad OS 18.1, which does have some Apple Intelligence with some writing tools and all that fun stuff, but I personally feel like all the good stuff comes with iPad OS 18.2. So yeah, while I was definitely a little bit salty when it comes down to the lacklusterness of iPad OS 18.1, iPad 18.2 is actually sort of something to look forward to. For example, now I can ask things like, why was there a spike of people searching Vaporeon in 2023? Oh god, I probably will not Google any of that. Or, why does MinimalisTech have the fattest ass in tech? Even requests like that, it'll give you an answer, albeit through ChatGPT. Still, it is an absolutely massive improvement to Siri's functionality, and GPT definitely helps fill all the gaps. Some dope use cases are in things like Apple Notes, where you can just populate a recipe or a workout split in seconds. That was actually pretty sick. I want to eat an entire turkey by myself. Give me a recipe. A 3-day minimalist workout split. Another one for me that was a bit surprising is in Apple Mail. Would you guys actually believe that Santa himself emailed me? My 3-year-old wasn't particularly good this year, so I did draft back an email to Santa, asking him to maybe give her a fresh salmon instead of presents. Reply back saying she wasn't that good and she should probably get a fresh salmon instead of presents. Legitimately wild. Still, if I wanted to trust a robot to do all of my bidding, I can have Apple Mail generate a reply, which I can make professional, friendly, or whatever else I might want. And as the teenagers say, I have negative 1000 aura, so this is an absolute lifesaver if I am attempting to court my wife that day. Apart from all that awesome Apple Intelligence stuff, what's actually driving all of this whole experience is the new A17 Pro chip that's in the iPad at least, and that's the same chip that was in, I think, the iPhone 15 Pro. Honestly, as you can tell already, this isn't really a technical review, but even compared to my iPad Mini 6, this still feels identical in terms of navigation and stuff, and that's not a bad thing. It just means the iPad is as snappy as ever. Where you might see an actual good bump in performance is when it comes down to any sort of gaming. Now, personally, I don't really game much on my iPad specifically, but but throwing down some more intensive titles like Diablo Immortal, it absolutely flies through it and it is a good experience. And when it comes down to gaming, between the form factor and the actual performance of it, I have heard that a lot of people use this specifically for mobile gaming. So if that's something you're into, you really will dig this. Besides that, of course, I did mention this is mainly a fun tablet and stuff, but if you do truly want to throw down some sort of video editing or something in Final Cut Pro, this actually handles it pretty well. So much so that I even did some of this videos editing on this iPad. It did work phenomenally. Should you be editing videos on an iPad mini? No, probably not, but if you wanted to, or if you're just starting out or something, you definitely could, and that's pretty badass. For me at least, what actually does help add some flair to some of my videos though is when I do use the Apple Pencil Pro to add some annoying nonsense to some of these frames, and that would be new to the iPad mini 7 in this case with Apple Pencil Pro support. Now, you might not actually know this about me, but I am an incredibly accomplished local artist, and pretty much wherever I go, whenever I'm doing my arting or artworking, whatever they call it, there's lines out the door. And the fact is, I can do some of my artwork on an Apple Pencil Pro with my iPad, so it's definitely a huge plus. The Apple Pencil Pro actually has some sweet barrel roll features alongside pressure sensitivity, which can make a good difference when doing anything on your iPad. But for real, every day, for me at least, it all comes down to the note-taking because I use my iPad mini every single day when it comes down to any sort of note-taking. It doesn't matter if I'm at the office or at home, I'm typically always writing notes on my iPad, and this isn't even sponsored, but honestly, just get some sort of paper-like screen protector. It makes an absolutely huge difference for anybody who's heavily into pencil use. It honestly just makes a good difference. I just really don't like the unnatural slipperiness of an iPad without a paper feeling protector. There are other brands as well, but definitely just consider getting something. Plus, if you ever really wanted to write in cursive with crayons, this is probably the only way to do it without looking like a dumbass.
Fuck yeah, crayons.
The last thing here that's new on the iPad mini 7 is Wi-Fi 6E, which means it's just a bit faster whenever you're navigating your scumbag activities on the interwebs. Now moving over to what hasn't changed with this iPad, it's pretty much everything else, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I definitely could have wanted some updates here on the other stuff, but for me it's sort of just whatever. What that means is the camera, speakers, mic, and the display pretty much all remain unchanged. Design-wise, the only change here is on the back now. It says iPad mini instead of just iPad, and the bezels are still thicker than me. Either way, this iPad remains pocketable as ever, which is always the main feature. And yeah, I think thinner bezels and a larger screen would have been pretty sweet, especially if this stayed the same size, but the screen itself that it is there is still pretty awesome. For me at least, it's still bright enough to watch any sort of degenerate media I'd want at 2 a.m. or just enjoying something normal like Dragon Ball Daima that just started. So far, I think it sort of sucks because nothing's really happened, but I am looking forward to how the show progresses. We'll see how that goes. And I know a lot of people love to complain about the 60Hz display on this iPad mini, but for me, it's sort of just whatever. Again, it's fine considering my use case is going to be primarily consuming content, if not just note-taking all the time. And yeah, the display gets plenty bright for what I'm using it for. If anything, while I have all those pretentious ass books on my desk, I barely touch them since if I'm going to be reading, I'm actually probably just going to be using my iPad mini. I don't know why this just helps me a lot. It's so accessible when it comes to reading, and it's always a good experience. It just helps me a lot, especially when it comes down to any sort of self-development. Lastly, and it might be changed or unchanged, I know the internet loves to complain about things that don't matter, but this whole jelly scroll screen thing, honestly, I never even noticed it before. I don't know if it's changed. Some people are saying it is, some people saying it isn't. It just doesn't matter, really, for me at least. Maybe in my use case, I don't see it. But yeah, the jelly scrolling screen thing, I simply don't see it on this iPad, so it's no biggie for me. When it comes down to the camera and the microphones, they're there and they're fine. And when it comes down to any sort of, FaceTime, video calls, any of that fun stuff, it's gonna do the job. Again, you're probably not gonna be trying to do any sort of cinematography with this camera, but it's there if you need it, and I dig it. Plus, I really do think Stage Manager is actually pretty sweet on the front camera, which is always fantastic for any sort of FaceTiming and all that fun stuff. And of course, despite the size of this iPad, I actually find the speakers pretty impressive. I always use this for music whenever I'm cooking. It's just legitimately useful.
Google's is me name. I like a swampy bog. It's time to play a game with your favorite Highland Pro. We've known each other for so long. Your heart's been...
Now, apart from me having a mature sense of humor, what else is missing when it comes down to this iPad? For me, I think the first thing that comes to mind is probably an OLED display. I know a lot of people care about 60 Hz and they'd rather have a higher refresh display. I personally don't care about that. I would just much rather have an OLED display. I just simply prefer OLED displays for the colors and stuff, and the M4 iPad clearly wrecks this iPad in the display department. Still, like I mentioned, this display is good enough for my use case, but yeah, I would have liked to see OLED. The second thing I would have loved to see is probably Stage Manager. And look, I know I said this iPad mini isn't supposed to be some sort of computer replacement and all that, but it would have just been nice to have, okay? Still, whenever I am making my 10 out of 10 local masterpieces, I can throw this up on a screen, which is still pretty badass. Lastly, I would have really loved to see Face ID on here. It's just hella useful. Touch ID is fine and all, but Face ID is fancy and I dig it. With that, I can definitely say the iPad mini 7 is a badass device, but there are some accessories that I do think that take the experience a little bit further. For me, that's going to be about 3 things. First is probably going to be the Apple Pencil I mentioned before. Even on my iPad mini 6, I'm not sure I could ever really go without the pencil functionality just based off of how much note-taking I do alone. The second is another accessory from Apple, which is actually their folio case. I just fucking hate how expensive it is. It's such a good folio case, but it is way overpriced for what it is. But at the same time, it's probably the only one I would buy just based off of the quality. It's just incredibly useful for the different angles you can put it at if you're going to be watching content, writing, whatever else. It's just a good folio and I do appreciate it. If for any reason I lost it or damaged it, I'd probably buy one the same day. Plus, it does protect my screen if I ever want to toss it in a bag. So yeah, just consider getting a folio if you're into the iPad mini. And the third and last one I care about is, again, that paper-like screen protector. I swear, just get one. Even if it's not the paper-like brand, there's a lot of other ones on Amazon and stuff, but those paper screen protectors make a huge difference in the iPad experience, especially if you're a huge pencil taker. I absolutely love it. Plus, it helps minimize oily fingerprints and all that if that's something that bugs you. Now, before this video gets longer than it is, who is this iPad for? The first thing that comes to mind is probably somebody with an older iPad, say the iPad mini 5 or before, or somebody who just doesn't have an iPad in the first place. I think for anybody on an older iPad, you'll definitely see a benefit on the iPad mini 7. And if you're new to iPads entirely, this will be an incredible option. The second person this iPad is for, which is a reason or excuse enough, but it's somebody like myself who is simply an iPad mini diehard. For me, like I mentioned, it's my absolute favorite iPad lineup of all time. Even my iPad mini 6 I used more than my M4 iPad Pro, and I just really dig the mini lineup. So if there's an update that I find useful enough for my use case, I'm gonna pick it up, which I definitely did. A quick mention too are those gamers. There's a huge slew of gamers who swear by the form factor and performance of this for handheld gaming, and obviously this just takes it to the next level. With that, this is the perfect iPad for anybody not looking for some sort of computer replacement or companion. It's just great for note-taking, any sort of basic productivity, emails, content creation, content consumption. It's all there pretty much in this tiny form factor, and I really dig it. So if you're not looking for any sort of massive world-changing iPad, this is definitely the one. And for me at least, while it won't be public for a while, I'm sorry to say, iPadOS 18.2 is an absolute deal maker for this iPad mini 7. And my guess is that we'll probably maybe see iPadOS 18.2 in sometime in maybe late December, maybe January. I'm not smart at all, like I mentioned, and I could be completely wrong, so don't quote me on that. That's just me hoping. But this ships with 18.1, so something to be mindful of. Till then, at least, this iPad mini will remain my go-to because I absolutely love it. I might be a fanboy, I don't know, maybe whatever, roast me if you want, but this iPad is incredible. And I think that's it. I appreciate you guys watching till the end. Till next time. Motherfucker.